Hello, my name's Andy Smith. I'm part of the Customer Value Office here at SITA at Borders. SITA's most well known for delivering services to airlines and airports. In fact, we've been doing that for nearly 80 years. What's less well known is that we've also been delivering services to governments and border management services for 30 years. And in fact, we're now celebrating our 30th anniversary. That's what this podcast is about, celebrating 30 years of SITA at Borders. To do that, I'm delighted to be joined by two colleagues, one from the very advent of Borders, Alistair McBain, and Thomas Hill, who's been with us for 3 years now, and bringing a much different perspective. So today, we're going to be talking about that 30-year journey, but just as importantly, how borders have changed in general, how our experience in delivering safe and secure travel has developed, and what Thomas and Alistair have actually found in their experience of working with borders. So, first thing, Alistair, please introduce yourself. Who are you and what do you do here at SITA at Borders?
Thank you, Andy. So, my name is Alistair McBain. I joined SITA 33 years ago. As a programmer, I spent the last 25 in borders, so not strictly the full 30, but certainly one of the first few people in when it was a team, before it became what we are now. And currently I'm a senior business analyst and I manage the Borders consultancy team.
Excellent. Thomas, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Andy. So my name's Thomas Hill. I joined SITA just over 3 years ago, as you said. Before joining SITA, I studied a degree in airline and airport management, so very aviation-based. Following that, I joined SITA on the graduate program, so that was for 2 years. When I completed that, I moved to a permanent position as a product specialist, so removing the graduate title and going to product specialist. And recently I've converted to a product manager, so I'm now working on managing our border control product, so that's our automated border control gates and kiosks.
We'll definitely talk about those later, but congratulations on the promotion.
Thank you.
Right, let's go back to the start. 1996, we were engaged with the Australian government to help them get ready for Sydney 2000 Olympics. Alistair.
Well, Borders at the time was still very manual. So 1996, as far as the airline industry is concerned, you're still just about starting with e-tickets. Mm-hmm. Boarding passes, electronic boarding passes, still hadn't really started. In-flight entertainment was still very much the screen at the front of the cabin. Digital entertainment has only really just arrived. And Borders were very manual. They were sticky post-it notes that officers used to work out who they were trying to intercept. But governments realised that technology was coming along, that they could actually utilise, that could make their life a lot better.
You touched on the technology. I mean, this is before smartphones. You mentioned in-flight, we're still dealing with VHS and floppy disks, which I'm sure you've never used, Thomas, have you?
No, just seen a few in my dad's loft, but personally never used them, no.
That's right, in the museums. Thanks a lot. We now feel very old, don't
Yes.
we? Absolutely.
Sorry about that.
So what was this idea of, I'm going to call it exporting the border, making decisions before somebody arrived? What was SITA's role in that?
Well, the way the overall process works is that when you're checking in, they get a chance to risk assess you, check whether you've got a visa or not. And they can deny you boarding. So they can say you don't have the necessary visa, or perhaps you failed a watch list check, and they would stop you getting on the plane at the departure point. That means, of course, you don't make a long trip, but also they don't have the problem of you arriving in the country. So now they're saving time and money. They're stopping you arriving. So as you say, exporting the border, their border is now your point of departure.
What other sort of types of border were you getting involved in 25 years ago?
So I first joined Borders when another government thought it would be a good idea to get hold of the API and PNR data.
This is your passport information and your booking information.
And your booking information. The problem was there was no standards around it. Well, there was for the API information, but there was no standards for PNR. Yeah. So they needed a company that understood how the data worked, that had the relationship with the airlines, and of course being owned by the airlines. So we wrote an application for them that took the data, extracted the data from the airline systems, and passed the information on to the government for them to do with what they wanted.
This became our API P&R gateway, did it?
Over the course of 25 years.
Right.
But yes, it started off as a single application that was installed within the country and then gradually installed within many countries, as I'm sure we'll talk about as part of larger systems, and has eventually evolved into our gateway. So yeah, still going.
Awesome. We'll definitely come back and talk about some of those. But Thomas, 3 years? What attracted you 3 years ago to joining SITA and particularly SITA at Borders?
Well, I think the borders industry itself is so like dynamic, and if I can say from like a personal perspective, I think it's really cool. Being able to speak to ministries of interior, people that actually run countries, that make key decisions in protecting their country, enhancing the border, looking at ways to modernize as well infrastructure and airports. I just thought of borders as really like a key player in modernizing future technology, infrastructure, and most importantly, security for not only people coming into the country, but protecting their status as a government.
I'm interested. Had you thought about that before? Had you sort of, as a traveller, sort of looked at the border and thought, wow, what do these guys do?
To be honest, no, I didn't really deep it as much as I do now. Joining Borders, I realized there's so many little knots and pieces involved in these big decisions that are being made. As a traveler, when I was maybe younger as a kid, I didn't really think much of it. Even as like a young adult traveling, I didn't really think there was much to it. But now understanding how the processes work, not just from when you get to the airport and you board the aircraft and you're flying, but also pre-departure, the steps you take to enroll yourself, submitting a ETA, an e-visa at home, checking in on the app. I didn't really think much of that, when I was doing it before joining SITA. Now, being part of SITA, I realize it's an end-to-end process, starting at home, making the travel, and then arriving and being processed through the border. That to me is like a very cool aspect. Yeah.
So does that make you a better traveller, or are you now more critical of delays and issues because you know what's going on?
A bit of both. I'm definitely quite, not judgmental, but I definitely see ways borders can be improved in certain countries, ways that countries are doing it very well and managing their borders. But yeah.
You also worked as a check-in agent, didn't you?
Yeah, I wanted to mention that actually, because before joining SITA, I had a few months gap between looking for a graduate role and just doing some part-time work in between. So I joined, Cathay Pacific, the airline, and I was a check-in agent working for Menzies. And yes, when I was checking in passengers, because traveling from London Heathrow with a stopover at Hong Kong to Australia was a very popular route. And therefore we had to check in and make sure the passengers are eligible and have the right visas and the right approval to enter the country. So sometimes we'd scan the passport and it would come back as do not board because they don't have, maybe there's a small detail like a wrong letter in their name, right? From the application they submitted on their visa versus what they have in their passport. So we'd get a do not board on the system, and then there'd be a number that would have to call. So we'd have to call them, the guys in Australia, saying, hi, could you please check this passenger is approved to travel and enter Australia? And they would check and they say, yes. In this case, let's assume that there was a misspelling in the name. So then they would give us a code, and we'll type that code in, and then it would be an okay to board. So they would override it, basically. So yes, exactly what SITA was offering, I was working with in the airport at Heathrow.
So, Alistair, I think I'm right. Thomas, out of the three of us, is the only one who's actually used our system in anger. We've developed and delivered,
Yes.
and he's actually used it as a customer.
Yes, so when I found that out, it was great to talk to him as to what is the practical experience of a check-in agent having to phone, hang on the phone for several minutes
Yes, yeah.
at times, and then, talk to the government and get the response as to whether they knew the override.
We've talked about the history. Let's now talk about the present. Right? How do we maintain an understanding of what our customers want? That operational use of our IT to deliver the benefits to them. What's your view of that, Alistair?
And I mean, there are secondary sources, so there's conferences and lots of other things out there, and SITA's part of working groups, so in terms of seeing what's happening in the future. But really it comes down to keeping close to customers, realising that whilst there's a lot of similarities, most customers do things a little bit uniquely as well.
So there's little differences
There's
that
little
make
differences
the
that really matter, yeah.
Have you managed to sort of keep that engagement with customers and bringing your previous experience using our systems to bear in your current role with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to actually have spoken to real customers that are looking to implement our solutions to enhance their airport or border security. If I'm looking at what I viewed whilst working in the airport 4 years ago versus what the customers are requesting today, I see a correlation between them all, and they're always talking about space, so space constraints. So as we know, like passenger numbers, they're increasing, global population, that's increasing. But one thing that's not really increasing is infrastructure space. Increase the space with the number of passengers that are coming into countries now.
Yeah.
So that's always a real factor that they mention. They want to not only utilize minimal space, that doesn't change, to manage these large groups of travelers, but also speed up processing times as well. So that's where they come to us, come to SITA, looking at ways that we can help advance their border security and management.
So without giving away any country names or customers, but what's your view of how borders operate today?
So one thing that hasn't changed with borders is it's still manual. There's still manual booths. Whichever border you go to, there will always be somebody there to process you at a manual counter. That's one thing that hasn't changed. I'm seeing lots of governments now wanting to implement automated solutions such as ABC gates and ABC kiosks to help facilitate faster processing of passengers without needing a border officer there to check your documents. And of course, those eligible nationalities, they're able to proceed through the e-gate. I'm seeing a lot of that at the moment.
So do you think generally we have efficient borders now?
I was going to say, compared with 30 years ago.
Well, that was going to be my next question. How does it compare to the last 30 years?
Well, 30 years ago, because it was manual, because primary line officers were using sticky notes to try and identify, so you weren't risk assessing everybody. Of course you weren't. You were only looking for the top 5 people on your watch list. You weren't doing any real sort of profiling. You were doing visual profiling, who's sweating, but you weren't doing anything. So there was
some more behavioural detection.
Yes,
yeah.
There was no behind the scenes risk assessment. So the coverage was poor. And now, if you're getting the data, countries can confidently say, well, I've checked everybody who's coming in somehow, one way or another. So I got much better coverage. And of course, with the data, you can do more.
Do we just need to keep getting more efficient in how we use data, or is the new technology we can adapt, for instance?
One of the big changes, again, I've seen over the time is biometrics.
Right.
Because, again, there wasn't biometrics back then, so you were relying totally on the manual passport. It wasn't e-passport, of course.
Yep.
So it was just the standard passport. So biometrics has given you much more confidence of somebody's identity. So that has changed. I think the one thing you have to be careful, though, is, yes, you get lots more data, but the criminals are aware of that. And of course, once they're aware that you've identified what they're doing, they change how they're doing it.
Yep.
So the use cases constantly change. And that is something that, governments are aware of and constantly have to adapt to. Because who you're looking for today and what they're doing today is not the same as next month and certainly not next year, because that'll have shifted.
Yep. And Thomas, Alistair mentioned biometrics there. I mean, certainly border automation wouldn't exist without biometrics, would it?
No, it wouldn't.
How have you found the use of biometrics over the last 3 years that you've been using it?
Well, I don't think much has changed in terms of biometrics. And when I first joined SITA, there was still, e-gates have been around for quite a few years, right? So being able to capture or verify your face versus your credential being your passport, I think that's a kind of standard use case that we see in the industry today. We want to be more digital, and we want to kind of reduce the amount of touch points that we have within airports. So by being able to just present your face as a verified identification that's linked to your passport, I think that's like the next step in terms of enhancing borders.
See, you've preempted me already. I was going to ask that the next step. So we've talked about the past, we've talked about the present. Let's talk about the future. Right? I'm not going to ask you to look 30 years into the future. Who knows what that's going to look like? But let's look over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. You touched on it there, Thomas. Where do you see border control going over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we're already seeing it happen right now, and that's touchless borders. So actually being able to enter a country without needing to show your passport and just simply walk through, what we call a digital travel lane or a biometric corridor. We already see some of that being implemented today in the industry.
No barriers at all?
No barriers at all. Just a simple corridor with nothing to stop you. Of course, there is still border officers in the back room watching via CCTV. Of course, there has to be some element of manpower there to be able to intercept any threats. But what we are seeing today is, yes, governments are very interested in having these touchless borders, reducing processing time, reducing traffic, and being able to simply manage the border just through an empty space. With these cameras, they're able to pick you up and verify, yes, this person has an e-visa, or this person is the nationality that's eligible to use this digital travel lane, and there's no threat. There's no threat to this passenger, or this passenger has no threat, sorry. So they can proceed using this corridor. Now, I think it's a very early stage at the moment. Only a few governments have implemented this, but I definitely see in the next, like I said, 5 or so years, this will be a more common use case within borders.
Okay. So Thomas has just addressed, with digital identities, with biometrics, with that sort of surety of who is coming, being able to process people on the move without barriers. How does that feed into how the pre-travel authorization is going? Knowing who is coming before they arrive in Thomas's digital travel lane, how is the pre-clearance world developing in this 5-10 year period as well?
Well, the big thing there really is the adoption of people submitting their data using their apps, so using smartphones, doing everything at home. I think now the use of phones is so common that that is something that is really, for the majority of passengers, is going to take off quite quickly.
Yeah.
That they'll just be quite comfortable with submitting their facial image, submitting whatever information they need, as long as they get the benefit at the other end. So
interesting. Just absolutely right. So SITA, as you know, SITA does the passenger trend survey every year. And I think this year, 87% of travellers wanted their digital identity on their smartphone and were prepared to share it in return for something, for that better experience.
Yeah, and I think that's the important bit from my perspective. That's what we work on, because if you submit your data from home and it takes, you're now spending more time getting ready to travel than you were in the past. It's not a case of picking up your boarding pass and heading off. You have to use the app. If you get through the airport at the other end much quicker, then that's fine. If you end up having to queue for 2 hours at the other airport, you're spending 2 hours thinking, why did I bother submitting this information? So it's not just about the technology. There is work that needs to be done at the airports, elsewhere, to make sure people actually benefit from it.
You're right, and this is coming together with, Thomas, your sort of the biometrically enabled border, that sort of frictionless approach, maybe not quite biometric corridors, with pre-clearance, with that identity assurance through digital identity. As you know, we've got customers in the Caribbean who have this mantra of from the plane to your hotel in 45 minutes. We all know tourists like to spend money in their hotels, not in immigration halls. Our business unit used to be called GSL,
Yes.
Government Solution Line. We're SITA Borders now. And one of the things I've noticed over the last few years is much more engagement with airlines. How's that played out for you, Alistair? The role of airlines in what we do at SITA Borders?
What got us into Borders was the airlines. Obviously, it was the provision of API and PNR data. Over the years, that has become standardized, particularly PNR. There's now PNR Gov. But what we're spending more time with is cruise companies. So as it's going fully multimodal, in terms of a border is not just an airport, but also hotels, car rental companies, telecoms, so the whole in-country events, to the extent that, maybe in 5 or 10 years' time, we're not SITA at Borders. Maybe we're actually beyond.
Ooh, what's the new name for the business unit?
I don't know. But we are as far as the government is concerned, we are dealing with threats, perhaps, of which the border is just part of it.
Yeah.
And to an extent, we're already in that space. It's just the name doesn't quite reflect that.
True.
We say governments because, of course, we don't just work for immigration, who are borders, but it's customs and security services and police who are all keen to use the data.
Well, I know one of the things we've advocated is a unified border, an integrated border involving immigration, customs, police. In Europe, we call it the PIU, don't we? The Passenger Information Unit, or Passenger Targeting Unit sometimes. But that unified command that can actually address all the threats in a much more integrated way. So yeah, interesting to hear that as well.
In that example you've given for the Caribbean, that of course again is beyond borders, because that would be using your digital travel credential to not just get into the country, but to access the hotel, to access the car rental. So again, it's borders and in country.
Alistair, what's been your favourite moment over the 25 years you've worked in borders?
My favourite moment, and I've had several like this, but the first one that started this trend. So I'm fortunate enough that, like you, I get to go out and actually meet customers. But the first time we demonstrated our system, so quite a number of years ago, 20 years ago probably at the time, to a new customer, and we pulled up a flight manifest in front of the user, and he nearly fell off his chair. He said, currently it takes me 3 days to get this information from an airline. They fax it through. Because the fax truncates the passenger names, I don't get all the proper names anyway, I only get the first parts of the names. And he said, you're now telling me that I can type in the flight number and press search, and I can get the full flight manifest now. He said, that changes my whole job, because I have the information before the plane lands. And it did. It changed his whole job. And that was 20 years ago. I've had similar moments with many other customers since, where they've identified a suspect and suddenly there has been tension in the unit as they're now organising themselves and getting ready to go down and do an intercept or something like that. And these are special moments because seeing the technology at work, it's not about the technology. It's about what they were able to do with it.
The operational outcome.
Operational outcome was identifying somebody, some action that needed to be taken. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all for.
And Thomas, less memories to draw on, but what's been your favourite or proudest moment in the last 3 years?
Well, to be honest, it's been outside of the office. So it's been actually not business travel, but holiday travel. So actually using my annual leave to go on holiday and actually seeing the solutions that we have been building and working on outside of the lab, away from the desk, and actually seeing it physically placed in a real airport with real passengers using it and real border guards overseeing the solution. I think to me that's a real wow factor. Like going from lab to seeing it in real life with real people using it. That to me is kind of like a proud moment. You can see what you've been working on over these past few years, and people using it successfully. So for me, that's my wow moment or memory here at SITA so far.
And you know what? I have to share both of those. Alistair, I'm with you. To hear an operational department tell me about very bad people that they have stopped, murderers and human traffickers and sex offenders that they've managed to arrest, is a very proud moment. But also, Thomas, standing in Orlando Airport, coming back from Disney and telling my family that's what we do, and seeing a SITA border automation system allowing me to board.
It makes it easy explaining to like family or friends you're traveling with, that's what I work on. That product there, if that makes sense.
It is very complicated to explain, isn't it? We're coming to the end of this discussion. Really sort of just want your sort of last thoughts on what you've experienced so far and what you're really most looking forward to over the coming years. And I'm going to start with you, Thomas.
So what I'm looking forward to in the next few years, I think, is more digitalization. As what I mentioned before is these kind of touchless corridors, these touchless borders, right? I think at the moment there's a standard in the industry as to what a good border can look like, how you can facilitate large numbers of travelers entering a country, whilst also ensuring security is in place. Now, of course, with SITA and our wide portfolio, we're able to do an end-to-end process with the border. So as I mentioned, at home, travel, and arrival. But what I think and what I'm looking forward to in the future is this more, less identification needed to be shown and more touchless and digital borders.
Alistair?
In one word, innovation.
Okay, that's a big word.
Yes. I'm looking forward to what will happen next that we haven't thought of. I mean, the reason I've been at SITA for so long, and the reason I've been in Borders for so long, is that we are fortunate that we work for customers that innovate. They want the next thing, even though they don't know what it is. But they want us to help them find out what it is. So we're doing things in Borders like gates and kiosks and biometrics, and now the digital travel lane that clearly didn't exist when I started.
Yeah.
And it is just exciting to know that there will be opportunities now. There is opportunities now and in the next few years, and there will continue to be opportunities to come up with whatever is the next thing in Borders. And then once we've done that and that becomes standard, we'll be on to the next thing and the next thing, because we have customers that drive it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I can add to Alistair's point on innovation, I think that's one thing SITA is very good at, is speaking directly to customers, hearing their requirements and being able to collaborate, work together and be innovative to create these next level solutions. I think the primary objective is to always hear the customer, listen to their requirements and work together and create this innovative solution. I think that's the way to go ahead in the future.
Couldn't put it better. I mean, you're absolutely right. As an innovative company in an exciting industry, and one that I think makes a difference to our world, it's kept Alistair and I interested for decades. I hope it keeps you interested for decades as well, Thomas.
Definitely.
So, thank you to Alistair and Thomas. I hope this has given you just a little bit of an insight of what we've found in the past, present, and hopefully future in what SITA Borders does, and how we're supporting the industry and hopefully learning ourselves, having a bit of fun along the way, and looking forward to the next 30 years, whatever they may bring. Thank you.